Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I've got some absolutely wild Reddit stories lined up for you. If you enjoy these kinds of videos, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment letting me know which story hit the hardest. Alright, let's jump into the first story. So I need to know if I'm in the wrong here, because my entire family is currently acting like I just committed some unforgivable sin. I'm 28 years old, and my older sister Emily is 32. We've never been particularly close, but things got really bad about 4 years ago when she started dating her now fiance, Marcus. From day one, Marcus made it clear he didn't like me. I'm talking cold shoulders at family dinners, eye rolls when I'd speak, and this general attitude like I was some kind of annoying pest he had to tolerate. Emily changed when she got with him. She stopped returning my calls, canceled plans constantly, and whenever we did see each other, she'd make these little comments about my life choices. I'm a freelance graphic designer, and she'd say things like, "Must be nice not having real job stress," or, "When are you going to get serious about your career?" It stung, but I tried to keep the peace for our parents' sake. Fast forward to 6 months ago. Emily and Marcus got engaged, and I genuinely was happy for her. Despite everything, she's still my sister. I sent her a congratulations text, and she responded with a simple, "Thanks." A few weeks later, I get a call from my mom saying Emily wants to talk to me about being a bridesmaid. I met Emily for coffee, thinking maybe this was her way of mending things between us. Wrong. She slides this list across the table, an actual printed list of bridesmaid requirements. The dress was $800. Hair and makeup was another $300, mandatory professional styling, no exceptions. The bachelorette party was a 4-day trip to Miami, estimated cost per person around $2,000. There were also mandatory attendance requirements for every single wedding event: engagement party, bridal shower, dress shopping trips, cake tasting, venue visits. I looked at this list and felt my stomach drop. I'm doing okay financially, but I'm not rolling in money. Between rent, student loans, and trying to save for my own future, dropping over $3,000 on someone else's wedding was just not feasible. I told Emily I was honored she asked, but I couldn't afford it. I offered to attend as a regular guest instead, said I'd love to celebrate her big day without the financial burden. Her face went ice cold. She told me that if I actually cared about her, I'd find a way to make it work. She said our parents would probably help me if I asked, and that this was a once-in-a-lifetime event I was being selfish about. I tried explaining my budget concerns again, and she cut me off, saying, "I guess I know where I stand with you," and walked out of the coffee shop. That was 3 months ago. Since then, my parents have been on my case constantly. They keep saying I'm ruining Emily's special day, that family is supposed to sacrifice for each other, and that I'm being unreasonable. My dad even offered to loan me the money. But here's the thing. I don't want to go into debt for a wedding where I'm clearly not actually wanted, just needed to fill a spot in matching dresses. Last week, the official wedding invitation arrived in the mail. My name wasn't on it, not as a guest, not as anything. I was completely excluded. I called my mom to ask what happened, and she got defensive, saying Emily has every right to invite who she wants, and that I made my choice when I declined being a bridesmaid. I pointed out that I never said I wouldn't attend the wedding, just that I couldn't be in the bridal party, and she said Emily felt too hurt and betrayed to have me there at all. Now here's where I might be wrong. I posted on my personal social media, nothing dramatic, just a story post that said, "When you get uninvited from a family wedding over budget concerns," with a shrugging emoji. I didn't name anyone, didn't add details, just vented. Within hours, my phone was blowing up. Emily's friends started messaging me, calling me petty and attention-seeking. My aunt called saying I was airing dirty laundry publicly. Emily sent me a long text about how I'm trying to ruin her wedding and make her look like a villain, and that I'm dead to her. My mom called crying, begging me to delete the post and apologize to Emily. She said I'm tearing the family apart and that I need to be the bigger person. I deleted the post, but I didn't apologize because honestly, I don't think I did anything wrong. Some of my friends say I should have just found a way to make the money work, that you only get one sister and one wedding. Others say Emily's being a bridezilla and my family's being manipulative. I'm sitting here wondering if I'm actually the villain in this situation, or if I just set a boundary that nobody wanted to respect. So tell me, am I wrong for refusing to go into debt for my sister's wedding? Let's get into the next story. Let me tell you about the most satisfying petty victory I've ever experienced, and how my neighbor's attempt at revenge made everything so much better. I live in a townhouse community where each unit has 2 assigned parking spots right in front of their place. It's clearly marked, numbers painted on the curb, the whole deal. My spots are numbered 14 and 15, right in front of my door. About 8 months ago, new neighbors moved in next door, a couple in their 50s named Doug and Cheryl. From week 1, Doug started parking in my spot number 15. Not occasionally, but every single day. The first few times, I let it slide. Maybe he didn't notice. Maybe he was still adjusting to the new place. But after 2 weeks of coming home from work and having to park 3 buildings down, I left a polite note on his windshield explaining that spot 15 was mine and asking him to use his assigned spots. He ignored it, kept parking there. I knocked on his door the next evening. Doug answered, and I introduced myself, explained the parking situation again. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "I like that spot. It's closer to my door than my actual spots. Just park somewhere else." I was stunned. I told him that's not how assigned parking works, and he literally closed the door in my face. So I called the property management company. They sent him a warning letter. He ignored it and kept parking in my spot. They sent another warning. He parked there anyway. Finally, after the 3rd warning, property management said they'd start having his car towed at his expense if he parked in my spot again. That's when things got interesting. Doug stopped parking in my spot, but now he started parking his car precisely 1 inch over the line into spot 14, my other spot, making it nearly impossible for me to park there without risking dinging his car. He was technically in his assigned spot, just barely, so management said there wasn't much they could do unless I could prove it was intentional obstruction. This went on for 2 months. Every single day, his car was angled just enough to make my life difficult. I started having to park in guest parking, which meant a 5-minute walk to my door carrying groceries, dealing with rain, all of it. I was complaining about this to my friend who's an amateur photographer, and she had a brilliant idea. She helped me set up a cheap security camera pointed at the parking spots, disguised as a decorative birdhouse on my little front porch. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected footage, beautiful, crystal clear footage of Doug deliberately angling his car over the line, sometimes even getting out, checking the angle, getting back in, and adjusting. He was doing it on purpose, and now I had proof. I sent the footage to property management with a formal complaint about harassment and intentional obstruction. They reviewed it, called it a violation of community guidelines, and fined him $300. Doug lost his mind. That weekend, he decided to get revenge. I woke up Saturday morning to find that someone had spray painted a crude drawing on the curb in front of my townhouse, right over my parking spot numbers. It was clearly meant to be offensive, though honestly it was so poorly done I couldn't even tell what it was supposed to be. I called property management immediately. They came out, took photos, checked their own security cameras at the community entrance, and guess what? They caught Doug on camera at 3 a.m, walking toward my building with a spray paint can. The property management company was done. They informed Doug he was in violation of the community conduct policy, fined him another $500 for property damage, and told him he was now on a watch list. One more incident, and they'd pursue eviction. But here's the best part, the part that makes this truly satisfying. To remove the spray paint, property management had to repaint the entire curb section. While they were at it, they repainted all the parking numbers in that row to be bigger, brighter, and more visible. They also installed a small sign on a post between our units that reads, "Assigned parking only. Violators will be towed," with the towing company's number in huge letters. Doug's attempted revenge actually resulted in better enforcement of the parking rules, a more visible reminder of the parking assignments, and him being out $800 in fines. The cherry on top? His wife Cheryl apparently found out about all of this, the warnings, the fines, the spray paint incident, and was furious that he'd been causing problems and wasting their money over a parking spot. I know this because I heard them having a screaming argument in their townhouse one evening, windows open, her yelling about how embarrassed she was and how he needed to act like an adult. These days, Doug parks neatly in his assigned spots, doesn't make eye contact with me, and rushes inside whenever he sees me coming. Cheryl actually apologized to me a few weeks ago when we ran into each other at the mailboxes, saying she had no idea what he'd been doing and that she was mortified. My parking spots are clear, my curb looks great, and Doug learned an expensive lesson about petty tyranny. Sometimes the universe really does deliver justice exactly the way it should. Let's jump into the next story. This situation has been building for months, and it finally exploded last week in the most bizarre family confrontation I've ever experienced. I'm 6 months pregnant with my first child, a girl, and my husband Jake and I are absolutely thrilled. We've been together for 8 years, married for 3, and this baby was very much planned and wanted. Early in the pregnancy, around week 12, we decided on a name, Rosemary Jane. Rosemary was Jake's grandmother's name. She passed away 5 years ago, and Jake was extremely close to her. Jane is my mother's middle name. The name felt perfect, honoring both sides of our family. Classic, but not too common. We made the mistake of sharing this name with our families at a dinner party when I was about 4 months along. Everyone seemed happy about it. My parents loved it. My siblings thought it was beautiful, and Jake's dad got a little emotional talking about his late mother. But Jake's mom, Linda, got very quiet. After dinner, Linda pulled me aside privately and said, "You know, I was thinking about using Rosemary if I ever had another daughter." I laughed, thinking she was joking, because Linda is 57 years old and has been very vocal about being done having kids for decades. She didn't laugh back. I said something like, "Oh well, good thing we got to it first then," trying to lighten the mood, and she just gave me this tight smile and walked away. Over the next few weeks, Linda started making weird comments. She'd say things like, "Rosemary is such a special name, it would be a shame to waste it," or, "I hope you're really sure about that name choice," or, "You have plenty of time to change your mind." Then, about a month ago, everything went sideways. Linda called Jake and told him she was pregnant. We were both shocked. We asked if she was serious, if she was okay, what was happening. She insisted she was pregnant, about 8 weeks along, and that she and Jake's dad were embracing this unexpected blessing. Jake's dad got on the phone and confirmed it, said they were surprised but happy, and that yes, Linda was definitely pregnant. They'd already been to a doctor, had an ultrasound, everything. Here's where it gets weird. Linda then said, "And we've decided if it's a girl, we're naming her Rosemary." The audacity, the absolute audacity. Jake told her that was our name. We'd already announced it, and it would be incredibly confusing to have 2 baby Rosemarys in the family born within months of each other. Linda said she couldn't help when life happens, and that Rosemary was her mother-in-law's name too, so she had just as much right to it. I was livid, but Jake asked me to let it go for the moment. He figured maybe she'd come to her senses, or maybe the pregnancy wouldn't progress, or maybe it would be a boy and the whole issue would disappear. Weeks went by. Linda posted about her pregnancy on social media, talked about it at family gatherings, started buying baby items. She was clearly committed to this narrative, but something felt off. She wasn't showing at all. She refused to let anyone come to doctor's appointments. She was vague about her due date. When people would ask normal pregnancy questions, she'd change the subject or get defensive. Jake's sister Amanda started getting suspicious. She's a nurse, and she told Jake privately that their mom's behavior didn't match someone actually going through a pregnancy. No morning sickness complaints, no food aversions, no typical pregnancy symptoms being mentioned at all. Last week, Amanda confronted Linda directly at a family Sunday dinner. She asked to see ultrasound photos. Linda said she didn't have them with her. Amanda asked what doctor she was seeing. Linda got angry and said that was private. Amanda pushed harder, saying she just wanted to be supportive and help, and Linda stood up and screamed that everyone needed to stop questioning her. It got ugly. Jake's dad tried to defend Linda, but even he seemed uncertain. Amanda, point blank, asked Linda to prove she was pregnant, and Linda started crying and ran out of the room. After she left, Jake's dad broke down. He admitted he'd never actually seen any ultrasound images or medical documentation. He'd only taken Linda's word for it. She'd been acting strange, secretive, and he'd started having doubts, but didn't want to believe she'd lie about something like this. We insisted on clarity. We said we weren't trying to be cruel, but this had gone too far, and we needed real proof before we'd entertain any more pregnancy talk. Yesterday, Linda finally admitted the truth. She's not pregnant. She never was. She made it all up because she wanted to use the name Rosemary, and she thought if she claimed she was pregnant and naming her baby that, we'd back off and choose something else for our daughter. Let me repeat that. My mother-in-law faked an entire pregnancy to try to steal my baby's name. The family is in chaos. Jake's dad is devastated and humiliated. Amanda is furious. Jake is barely speaking to his mother. My parents think Linda needs serious psychological help. Linda is now claiming she had a mental health episode and didn't mean any harm, that she just loved the name so much and felt territorial about it because it was her mother-in-law's name. She's asking for forgiveness and understanding. Jake and I are standing firm. We're still naming our daughter Rosemary Jane. We've also set some serious boundaries with Linda, including that she won't be at the hospital when I give birth, and she'll only meet the baby when we're ready and comfortable. Some extended family members think we're being too harsh, that Linda clearly has some issues and needs support, not punishment. Others think we're being too soft and should cut her off completely. I don't even know what to think anymore. I'm growing an actual human being while dealing with the fact that my mother-in-law staged a fake pregnancy in some bizarre power play over a name. So yeah, that's where I am right now. Processing the absolute insanity of the past few months, and trying to focus on the fact that in 3 months, I'll have my daughter, my Rosemary Jane, and none of this drama will matter as much. But seriously, what possesses someone to fake a pregnancy over a baby name? Let me tell you about the time I discovered my roommate was living an elaborate double life, and how it all came crashing down in the most awkward way possible. I'm 25, and last year I moved to a new city for a job opportunity. I found an apartment listing online where someone named Tyler was looking for a roommate. We did a video call. He seemed normal and chill. The rent was reasonable, and the place looked nice. I moved in 2 months later. Tyler told me he worked in finance, had a high-stress job at an investment firm downtown, and traveled frequently for work. He was gone a lot, sometimes for days at a time. But when he was home, he was friendly enough. We weren't best friends, but we coexisted peacefully. He had a pretty nice lifestyle. Expensive clothes, always ordering fancy takeout, drove a luxury car. He told me he made good money in finance and had some family wealth, which explained it. I didn't question it because honestly, it wasn't my business. About 4 months into living together, I started noticing small things that didn't add up. He'd get work calls that sounded weird. The language didn't sound like business talk, more like he was discussing character motivations and scene blocking. Once I heard him say something about hitting his mark and knowing his lighting, which seemed odd for finance work. He'd also disappear for business trips, but his luggage was always weirdly minimal for someone supposedly going to week-long conferences, like he'd leave for 5 days with a backpack. Then there was the time I borrowed his laptop because mine died and I needed to send an urgent work email. He'd left it on the kitchen counter and told me his password for emergencies. I opened it up, and his browser history was full of casting call websites, actor resume templates, and headshot photographer portfolios. I didn't snoop further because that felt invasive, but the seed of doubt was planted. The real unraveling happened 3 months ago. I was out with some coworkers at a bar downtown, and one of them mentioned wanting to see this new experimental theater production that was getting buzz. Another coworker pulled out her phone to look up tickets, and suddenly she gasped and said, "Oh my God, is that your roommate?" She turned her phone around, and there on the theater company's website was a professional headshot of Tyler, listing him as the lead actor in their current production. My brain short-circuited. I grabbed her phone and scrolled through. Tyler, my finance professional roommate who supposedly traveled for work, was an actor, not just doing community theater as a hobby, but full-time professional acting. The theater company's site had his full bio, listing years of credits, awards, training programs, everything. I felt like an idiot. All those business trips were shows in other cities. All those weird phone calls were rehearsals or director conversations. The minimal luggage made sense because he was just doing performances, not actual business travel. But why lie? Why create this elaborate fake career? I decided to confront him directly. When he got home that night from what he told me was a client dinner, I asked him to sit down because we needed to talk. I showed him the theater website on my phone. His face went completely pale. The truth came spilling out, and it was somehow sadder than I expected. Tyler's parents are extremely wealthy, old money conservative types who had very specific expectations for their children's careers. Tyler's older brother is a surgeon. His sister is a corporate lawyer, and Tyler was supposed to go into business or finance, like his father. But Tyler wanted to act. He'd loved it since he was a kid, did theater all through school, and went to college for performing arts despite his parents' disapproval. When he graduated and told them he wanted to pursue acting professionally, they gave him an ultimatum: get a real job, or they'd cut him off financially. Tyler chose acting, and his parents followed through. They cut him off completely, stopped paying for anything, and told the extended family that Tyler was working in finance to save face. Here's the kicker. Tyler's been lying to his entire family for 3 years. He sends them fake updates about his finance career, makes up stories about deals and clients, and avoids going home for holidays because maintaining the lie in person is too exhausting. The reason he lied to me, a random roommate, he'd gotten so deep into the deception that it became automatic. He was terrified that if anyone knew the truth, it might somehow get back to his family. He also admitted he was embarrassed about being a broke actor who couldn't afford nice things without the acting looking unsuccessful, so he'd built this persona of the well-off finance guy to feel less vulnerable. The fancy clothes, costumes he'd collected from various shows, the luxury car, borrowed from a friend in exchange for pet sitting, the expensive takeout. He ate ramen most nights, but splurged occasionally when I was around to maintain appearances. I didn't know whether to be angry or just feel terrible for him. I asked why he didn't just tell me the truth from the beginning. He said the lie had become so automatic that he didn't even think about it anymore. And by the time he realized I'd probably be fine with the truth, we were months into living together, and it felt too late to come clean without looking insane. We talked for hours that night. I told him I didn't care what he did for work as long as he paid rent on time, and that I thought it was awful his parents put him in that position. He broke down crying, saying he hadn't told anyone the full truth in years, and the weight of maintaining the lie was exhausting. Tyler's doing better now. He stopped lying to me about his schedule, and I actually went to see one of his shows last month. He was incredible, like genuinely talented, and I told him his parents were idiots for not supporting him. He's still lying to his family, though. He says he's not ready to blow up his entire relationship with them, even if it's built on deception. I think that's sad, but I get it. Family stuff is complicated. The weird part is, now that I know the truth, we're actually better roommates. He's more relaxed, doesn't have to keep up the exhausting performance at home, and we've become actual friends. But man, imagine living such an elaborate lie that you can't even be honest with your roommate about your job. That's some next-level commitment to a cover story. Let me tell you about the family reunion that turned into an absolute disaster and somehow ended with me becoming the most hated person in my extended family. For context, my dad's side of the family is huge and very into tradition. Every 5 years, we have a massive family reunion, usually about 60 to 70 people, at my uncle's property upstate. It's a whole weekend thing with camping, a big cookout, games, the works. This year was the reunion year, and the planning started about 8 months in advance. My Aunt Carol took charge of organizing everything, which was already a red flag because Carol is, to put it mildly, a control freak who turns every event into a referendum on her superiority. Carol created a Facebook group for planning and immediately started assigning tasks. Who would bring what food? Who was in charge of activities? Who would handle setup and cleanup? All of it. She made spreadsheets. She sent calendar invitations. She treated this family reunion like it was a Fortune 500 corporate merger. I was assigned to the beverages committee along with my cousin Jake. Our job was to provide all drinks for the entire weekend: water, soda, juice, beer, wine, everything, for 70 people. I did the math. This was going to cost somewhere between $400 and $600, depending on what we bought. When I mentioned this in the planning group, Carol said everyone's assignments were roughly equal in cost and effort, and it would all balance out. It did not balance out. Some people were assigned things like, bring a bag of ice, or bring hamburger buns. Others, like me and Jake, were assigned massive, expensive responsibilities. When I pointed this out, Carol got defensive and said if I couldn't handle it, she'd find someone more committed to family. Whatever. Jake and I split the cost, bought everything, and moved on. The weekend of the reunion arrived. I loaded up my car with coolers full of drinks and drove 3 hours to my uncle's property. The place looked great. Carol had clearly put in work organizing everything. Tents were set up. Decorations were everywhere. The big grill area was ready to go. But within the first few hours, things started going sideways. First, Carol had created a schedule, an actual minute-by-minute schedule for the entire weekend. Breakfast at 8, nature hike at 9:30, lunch at noon, family photo at 1, games at 2, free time at 3:30, dinner at 6, campfire at 8. She'd printed out copies and posted them around the property. People were annoyed, but mostly went along with it to keep the peace. Then came the family photo. Carol had hired a professional photographer without telling anyone or asking people to chip in for the cost, and now expected everyone to dress nicely and pose for formal family portraits. Several people, including me, hadn't brought nice clothes because we were told this was a casual camping weekend. Carol had a meltdown, saying we were ruining the photos and disrespecting the family by not taking it seriously. The photographer took the photos anyway, with half of us in hiking clothes and t-shirts, while Carol stood there fuming. Saturday evening, the real disaster happened. Dinner was supposed to be this elaborate cookout with steaks, grilled vegetables, fancy sides, the whole deal. Carol had assigned my Uncle Frank and my cousin Danny to handle the grilling. Frank and Danny are not experienced grillers. They completely botched it. The steaks were either raw or burnt to charcoal. The vegetables were somehow both undercooked and burnt. It was a catastrophe. People were trying to eat what they could, but it was genuinely bad. Carol started crying, like full-on sobbing in front of everyone, saying her perfect reunion was ruined and nobody appreciated how hard she'd worked. Here's where I made my mistake. I was standing with a group of cousins, and I muttered, not even that loudly, maybe if she'd let people just bring what they wanted instead of micromanaging everything, we'd be having more fun. Someone heard me. Someone told Carol. Carol came storming over, tears streaming down her face, and started screaming at me in front of the entire family. She said I was ungrateful, disrespectful, and that I'd been complaining and undermining her the entire weekend. She said, if I hated it so much, I should leave. I tried to explain I was just venting and didn't mean for her to hear it, but she was beyond reasoning. She demanded I apologize to everyone for ruining the reunion with my negativity. I refused. I said I'd done everything asked of me, spent hundreds of dollars on drinks, and made one comment out of frustration. I wasn't going to apologize for that. My dad tried to mediate, but Carol wouldn't hear it. She said either I apologize or I leave. So I left. I packed up my stuff, loaded my car, and drove home at 9 o'clock at night. Several of my cousins texted me saying they didn't blame me and that Carol had overreacted. But in the main family group chat, it was a different story. Relatives I barely know were chiming in about how I'd disrespected Carol's hard work, how I'd embarrassed the family by leaving early, and how I owed her an apology. My Aunt Sharon said I was too proud and needed to learn humility. My Uncle Greg said young people today don't understand the value of family. It's been 3 months, and the family's still divided. Some people think Carol was unreasonable and turned the reunion into a dictatorship. Others think I was disrespectful and should have kept my mouth shut. Carol has refused to speak to me. She's blocked me on all social media and told family members she won't attend any events I'm at. My dad is caught in the middle, trying to keep the peace, but also admitting privately that Carol went overboard. The kicker? I found out later that Carol had spent over $3,000 of her own money on the reunion. The photographer, decorations, extra food she ordered when people didn't bring enough, and she never told anyone or asked for contributions. She just did it, expected gratitude, and then melted down when things didn't go perfectly. Part of me feels bad. If I'd known how much she'd spent and how much pressure she'd put on herself, maybe I would have been more patient. But part of me thinks she created that situation by refusing to delegate or ask for help, and then expected everyone to perform like actors in her perfect family reunion fantasy. So now I'm the villain in half my family's eyes, and I'm probably not going to the next reunion in 5 years, if there even is one after this disaster. All right, this is the story of how a guy I worked with destroyed his entire career over stolen lunches, and how his comeuppance was more satisfying than I ever could have imagined. I work at a mid-sized tech company, about 150 employees. We have a typical office setup with a communal kitchen, refrigerators, the whole deal. And like many offices, we had a lunch thief problem. For months, people's lunches were disappearing from the fridge. Not everyone, not every day, but frequently enough that it became a real issue. Someone would bring a nice homemade meal, label it, put it in the fridge, and come lunchtime, it would be gone. People started putting aggressive notes on their food. Do not eat. This is not yours. Some people bought lunch boxes with locks. Others started keeping their lunch at their desks, which defeated the purpose of the office fridge. The weird thing was, it was always the good lunches that disappeared. If you brought a sad desk salad or a basic sandwich, it would be fine. But if you brought something that looked homemade and delicious, it was at risk. This went on for probably 6 months. HR sent out emails reminding people to respect others' property, but the thefts continued. Then my coworker Melissa decided she'd had enough. Melissa is one of those people who's really into cooking. She meal preps elaborate dishes, watches cooking shows, the whole deal. Her lunches were getting stolen at least once a week, and she was furious about it. One Monday, Melissa came into work with her usual labeled container, but this time she'd made something special, an extremely spicy curry that she'd loaded with ghost peppers and Carolina Reapers. She ate spicy food regularly and could handle it, but this was next-level heat, the kind that makes most people physically ill. She put a clear label on it with her name, the date, and, extremely spicy, Melissa's lunch, then put it in the fridge. Sure enough, lunchtime rolled around, and her food was gone. About 20 minutes later, we heard someone in the bathroom down the hall clearly in distress, like genuinely suffering. This went on for a while, and eventually our coworker Greg emerged looking absolutely wrecked, sweating, pale, eyes watering. He went straight to HR. Greg told HR that Melissa had poisoned him with her lunch. He claimed she deliberately made dangerously spicy food, knowing he'd eat it, and he wanted her disciplined or fired. HR called Melissa in. She calmly explained that it was her lunch, labeled with her name and a warning that it was extremely spicy, and she'd made it for herself because she enjoys spicy food. She asked why Greg was eating her clearly labeled lunch in the first place. Greg apparently tried to claim he'd accidentally taken it, thinking it was his. The problem? Greg hadn't brought lunch that day. He had no lunch in the fridge. There was no possibility of confusion. HR investigated. They checked the kitchen camera footage. Turns out there were cameras that covered part of the kitchen area, though not directly showing inside the fridge. The footage showed Greg opening the fridge, looking at multiple containers, specifically selecting Melissa's labeled container, and walking away with it. But it gets better. HR decided to review more footage from previous days. Over the course of 2 weeks of footage, they documented Greg stealing lunches at least 8 times. He'd scope out the fridge, select something that looked good, and take it. Greg was the lunch thief. The entire time, it had been Greg. HR confronted him with the evidence. He initially denied it, then admitted to taking food. A few times, when he forgot his lunch, then finally admitted it had been an ongoing thing. He was fired immediately, not just for the thefts, but because he tried to get Melissa in trouble for his own wrongdoing, which HR classified as retaliation and creating a hostile work environment. But the story doesn't end there. Greg filed for unemployment, claiming he was wrongfully terminated. The company fought it, providing all the evidence of his thefts and false accusations. His unemployment claim was denied. Then, because apparently Greg couldn't let it go, he tried to sue Melissa personally for assault over the spicy lunch. He claimed she'd intentionally caused him physical harm. Melissa's lawyer, who was probably having the time of his life with this ridiculous case, responded with evidence that the lunch was clearly labeled, intended for Melissa's own consumption, and that Greg had no legal right to eat someone else's property regardless of its contents. The case was dismissed almost immediately, and Greg was ordered to pay Melissa's legal fees. The final twist? Greg's firing and the lawsuit became a minor news story in our local area because it was so absurd. Man sues coworker after stealing her spicy lunch was an actual headline. Now Greg's name is permanently associated with continue this embarrassing story. Any potential employer who Googles him will find articles about how he was fired for stealing lunches and then tried to sue the woman whose food he stole. Melissa became a minor legend in the office. People started bringing her gift cards to spicy food restaurants and hot sauce as thank you gifts for solving the lunch theft problem. And the best part? Nobody's lunch has been stolen since. Turns out it really was just Greg the entire time. So yeah, that's the story of how a guy threw away his entire career, lost a lawsuit, and became a local news punchline because he couldn't stop stealing other people's lunches. Sometimes, justice is served ice cold. Sometimes it's served with ghost peppers. Time to move on to the next story. This is probably the most confusing relationship situation I've ever been in, and I'm still not entirely sure how to feel about it. I've been dating my girlfriend Sarah for about 1.5 years. Things were good. We lived together, talked about future plans. The relationship felt solid. She worked as a marketing consultant. I work in software development. We were both in our late 20s and felt like we were building something real. Sarah was always pretty private about social media. She had an Instagram account that she rarely posted on, maybe once every few months, usually just a photo of a sunset or her coffee or something equally generic. She never posted photos of us together, which I thought was a little odd, but she said she just wasn't into sharing her personal life online, and I respected that. About 4 months ago, I was at a coffee shop working on my laptop when a woman approached me and said, "Oh my God, are you Sarah's boyfriend? I follow her account. You two are so cute together." I was confused. I told her Sarah barely posted anything, and certainly not about our relationship. The woman looked puzzled and said, "What? She posts about you all the time. Like multiple times a week." She pulled out her phone and showed me an Instagram account. The username was similar to Sarah's regular account, but slightly different. Like if Sarah's regular account was Sarah Johnson, this one was Sarah's Johnson, or something like that. The account was full of photos of us. and I mean full. There were hundreds of posts, photos of me that I didn't know Sarah had taken, photos of us together that I recognized, and ones I didn't, photos of things I'd given her, screenshots of sweet texts I'd sent, even photos of me sleeping or working at home that were taken without my knowledge. Every post had these long, gushy captions about our relationship, about how much she loved me, about what I'd done that day that was sweet or funny. It was like reading someone's diary, except it was posted publicly for thousands of strangers to see. I was completely blindsided. I had no idea this account existed. I scrolled through, and the more I saw, the weirder it felt. The account had over 12,000 followers. The comments were full of people I didn't know talking about our relationship, like they were invested in it, giving advice, saying things like, "You two are relationship goals," or asking when we were getting engaged. Sarah had created this entire online narrative about our relationship without ever telling me. I went home that night and asked her about it directly. I showed her the account on my phone and asked why I was all over an Instagram account I didn't know existed. She got immediately defensive. She said it was her account and she could post what she wanted. I said it wasn't about control. It was about the fact that she'd been documenting our entire relationship in detail for thousands of strangers without my knowledge or consent. She started crying and said she didn't think I'd understand. She said she'd started the account early in our relationship as a way to document happy moments, and it had just grown from there. People had started following her, engaging with her posts, and it made her feel good to share. I asked why she never mentioned it, or asked if I was okay with being posted. She said she was afraid I'd say no and make her delete it, and the account had become important to her. That's when I learned the truly weird part. Sarah had built an entire online community around this account. She'd made friends through it, joined group chats with other relationship bloggers, and even participated in Instagram engagement groups where people would promote each other's content. The account wasn't just about documenting our relationship. It had become a part of her identity and social life that I had no idea existed. I told her I felt violated. There were photos of me in private moments, sleeping, working from home in pajamas, even one of me crying after I'd gotten bad news about a family member. She'd posted all of it with captions about comforting me and being there for me, turning my private pain into content for strangers. Sarah insisted she never said anything negative about me, that it was all positive and loving, and she didn't understand why I was upset. She said most people would be flattered to have a partner who was so proud of them that they wanted to share. I asked her to delete the account. She refused. She said she'd worked hard building that community and those friendships, and the account wasn't just about me. It was about her documenting her life. She offered to stop posting photos of me going forward, but she wouldn't delete what was already there. We fought about this for weeks. I felt like my privacy had been invaded and my consent had never been considered. She felt like I was trying to control her social media and take away something that made her happy. I talked to friends about it, and opinions were split. Some people thought Sarah had absolutely violated my privacy and that posting someone extensively without their knowledge was creepy and wrong. Others thought I was overreacting and that couples post about each other all the time, and this wasn't that different. The breaking point came when I discovered Sarah had posted about our fights. Not directly, but through vague posts like, "Having a tough day in paradise," or, "Relationships take work, and I'm grateful for the journey," with sad face emojis. People in the comments were taking sides, giving her advice on our private relationship issues, telling her she deserved better. She turned our private conflicts into public content. I told her this was a deal breaker for me. Either she deleted the account or at least made it private and removed the posts featuring me without my consent, or I was done. She said I was being controlling and unreasonable. She made the account private, but refused to delete any posts. We broke up 2 months ago. The weird aftermath is that Sarah's account is still going. It's private now, but mutual friends have told me she's still posting, now about the breakup and her healing journey. Apparently, she's framing the whole thing as me not being able to handle how open and vulnerable she is, and her followers are very supportive. I've blocked the account and moved on, but I still think about how bizarre the whole situation was. Like, imagine finding out your girlfriend has been running a public relationship blog about you for over a year without your knowledge, with 12,000 people following along. Some friends think I should have been more understanding. They say it's just social media, and I made it a bigger deal than it needed to be. Others think Sarah had serious boundary issues, and the whole thing was a huge red flag. I don't know. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe she crossed a line. Maybe it's both. All I know is that dating someone who treats your relationship like public content without your consent is exhausting, and I'm glad to be out of it. Let's dive into the next story. I need to vent about the most frustrating workplace situation I've ever experienced and how standing up for myself almost cost me my career. I work as a graphic designer at a mid-sized advertising agency. It's a competitive environment, but I've always loved the creative challenges and the fast pace. My boss, Jennifer, is the creative director, and up until 6 months ago, I thought we had a good working relationship. Here's what happened. Our agency was pitching for a major client, a sustainable clothing brand looking to rebrand completely. This was a huge deal, potentially a 6-figure contract, and everyone in the creative department was encouraged to submit concept ideas for the pitch. I spent weeks developing my concept. I created mood boards, designed logo mock-ups, developed a complete visual identity system with color palettes, typography choices, and sample marketing materials. I was really proud of it. The concept centered around this idea of circular fashion, using circular shapes and flowing lines to represent sustainability and the life cycle of clothing. I submitted my concept to Jennifer, along with everyone else's ideas, and we had a meeting where she'd review everything and decide what we'd present to the client. In the meeting, Jennifer went through everyone's concepts, gave feedback, and then said she'd take a few days to think about the direction. She didn't give much reaction to my concept specifically, just nodded and said, "Interesting approach." A week later, Jennifer called a team meeting to reveal the final pitch concept we'd be presenting. It was my concept. Almost exactly. The circular design elements, the color palette, the typography, the tagline I'd written, all of it was there. But Jennifer presented it as her own work. She walked us through her vision and her creative process, and I sat there in complete shock. At first, I thought maybe she'd say something like, building on ideas from the team, or inspired by concepts we discussed. But she didn't. She took full credit. After the meeting, I approached her privately. I very carefully said that I'd noticed the pitch concept was very similar to what I'd submitted, and I wanted to clarify the attribution. Jennifer got cold immediately. She said that all ideas submitted become agency property, and that as creative director, it was her job to synthesize team input into a cohesive vision. She said my concepts had been a starting point, but that she'd elevated and refined it significantly. I looked at the pitch deck she'd created. She'd literally used some of my exact mock-ups, just with her name on them. I didn't know what to do. I was early in my career. Jennifer had been in the industry for 15 years, and I didn't want to be labeled as difficult or not a team player, so I let it go. The pitch was successful. We won the client. The agency celebrated. Jennifer got praised by upper management, and there was talk of her getting a significant bonus for landing such a major account. I got nothing, not even a thank you or acknowledgement that my work had contributed. Over the next few months, Jennifer started taking credit for more of my work. I designed something for a client presentation, and she'd present it as her own creation. I'd come up with a campaign concept in a brainstorming session, and she'd pitch it to clients as her original idea. Other junior designers started noticing too. One of my coworkers, Marcus, told me that Jennifer had been doing this for years, taking credit for junior staff's work to boost her own reputation and secure bigger clients and bonuses. I was furious, but felt trapped. Jennifer controlled my projects, my performance reviews, my career advancement. Going against her felt like career suicide. Then, about 2 months ago, something happened that changed everything. The sustainable clothing brand, the major client we'd won with Jennifer's concept, requested a meeting to discuss expanding their contract. They wanted to work directly with the designer who created the visual identity because they were so impressed with the work. Jennifer, of course, assumed they meant her and scheduled the meeting, but the client had done their homework. Someone on their team had connected with someone at our agency, I think it was an account manager who wasn't in Jennifer's department, and had learned that the original concept had come from me. In the meeting, the client specifically asked to have me present, saying they'd heard I was the designer behind the original visual identity. Jennifer's face went white. She tried to deflect, saying it was a collaborative process, and she'd be happy to present, but the client insisted. They said they wanted to work with the actual designer, that they valued authentic creative relationships, and they'd heard great things about my work specifically. I had to present, with Jennifer sitting right there, watching. I walked them through the concept, explained my creative process, showed them the original materials I developed. The client loved it, praised my work, and said they specifically wanted me leading the design for their expansion campaign. After the meeting, Jennifer pulled me into her office and absolutely tore into me. She said I'd undermined her authority, embarrassed her in front of a client, and violated the chain of command. She said I should have deferred to her as creative director regardless of what the client asked. I finally snapped. I told her that she'd been stealing my work for months, taking credit for ideas and designs I'd created, and that I wasn't going to let it continue. She threatened to fire me for insubordination. I told her to go ahead, and that I'd be happy to explain to HR and upper management exactly why I was being fired, complete with time-stamped files of my original work and documentation of when she'd presented it as her own. She backed down, but said our working relationship was irreparably damaged and she'd be watching me closely. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer made my life miserable. She excluded me from meetings, gave me tedious projects, made passive-aggressive comments, and generally tried to push me out. But here's where things turned around. The client, apparently very happy with my work, had reached out to upper management at our agency to specifically praise me and request that I be the lead designer on all their future projects. They'd also casually mentioned that they were pleased to finally be working directly with the original designer of their visual identity. Upper management started asking questions. They reviewed project files, looked at submission records, and talked to other staff members. They discovered that Jennifer had a pattern of taking credit for junior designers' work. Multiple people confirmed it. There was documentation showing original files created by junior staff that later appeared in Jennifer's presentations with only her name attached. Jennifer was called into a meeting with HR and the executive team. I don't know exactly what was said, but she was given an ultimatum: accept a demotion and mandatory management training, or leave the company. She left. She actually quit rather than accept the demotion, and she left in dramatic fashion, sending an agency-wide email about how she was unappreciated and moving on to better opportunities that value real creative vision. A few people defended her, mostly senior staff who'd benefited from working with her, but most people were relieved she was gone. I wasn't promoted to creative director. I'm too junior for that. But I was given a significant raise, a new title as senior designer, and I'm now the lead on the sustainable clothing brand account, which has become one of the agency's biggest clients. The aftermath has been complicated. Some people think I threw Jennifer under the bus and cost her her career. Others think she got what she deserved for years of taking credit for other people's work. I've had moments of doubt, wondering if I should have handled it differently, if I escalated things unnecessarily. But then I remember sitting in that meeting watching her present my work as her own, and I know I made the right choice. Nobody should have to watch someone else take credit for their creativity and hard work. And if standing up for myself made me difficult, then fine. I'd rather be difficult than invisible. The funny thing is, Jennifer did teach me something valuable, just not what she intended. She taught me that talent alone isn't enough. You have to be willing to fight for recognition and not let people erase your contributions. So yeah, that's the story of how my boss tried to steal my career-making idea and how it backfired spectacularly. This is the story of how I became the villain at a family gathering without meaning to, and why my brother didn't speak to me for 3 months. My brother Derek is 31. I'm 28. We've always been close, despite the typical sibling rivalry growing up. He'd been dating his girlfriend Amanda for about 4 years, and everyone in the family loved her. She was kind, funny, fit right into our chaotic family dynamic. Last summer, my parents decided to have a big family reunion weekend at their lake house. It was going to be the whole extended family: grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. About 40 people total. A few days before the reunion, Derek called me and told me he was planning to propose to Amanda during the weekend. He had this whole plan. He'd take her out on the boat at sunset on Saturday evening, propose out on the water with the beautiful scenery, and then they'd come back to the dock, where the whole family would be waiting to celebrate. He asked me to be in charge of organizing the family for the surprise. My job was to make sure everyone was at the dock at the right time, keep them quiet, and coordinate the celebration for when they got back to shore. I was honored he trusted me with this and promised I'd make it perfect. The weekend started out great. Family arrived Friday evening. Everyone was catching up. The weather was beautiful. Derek seemed nervous, but excited, and Amanda had no idea what was coming. Saturday afternoon, I started subtly letting family members know about the proposal plan. I'd pull people aside and quietly tell them, "Derek's proposing tonight at sunset. Meet at the dock at 7. It's a surprise." Everything was going according to plan. Then my cousin Rachel showed up late Saturday afternoon. Rachel is sweet, but notoriously bad with secrets. Like, pathologically unable to keep quiet about anything. I specifically decided not to tell Rachel about the proposal for this exact reason. I figured I'd just herd her down to the dock with everyone else at the last minute. But my aunt, who I'd told about the proposal, apparently didn't get the memo about not telling Rachel. My aunt told Rachel all about the proposal plan, including the timing and the setup. Rachel, excited and wanting to be helpful, decided she needed to make sure Amanda looked perfect for the proposal photos. So Rachel approached Amanda around 5 in the afternoon and said, "You should go change into something nice and fix your hair. You'll want to look good for the photos tonight." Amanda, confused, asked what photos. Rachel, in a moment of absolute brain malfunction, said, "For when Derek proposes, you'll want to look back on these photos forever." I was inside the house when this happened. I only found out because my cousin Sarah came running in, white-faced, and said, "Rachel just told Amanda about the proposal." My heart dropped into my stomach. I ran outside and found Amanda standing there looking shocked, and Rachel looking horrified as she realized what she'd done. Rachel was already crying and apologizing. I didn't know what to do. Derek and Amanda's dad had already left in the boat. They'd gone out early so Derek's future father-in-law could be part of the proposal moment. They were probably already heading to the proposal spot. I tried calling Derek. No answer. He'd left his phone at the house. I tried calling Amanda's dad. Also no answer. Amanda was just standing there, processing. She asked me if it was true, if Derek was really proposing tonight. I couldn't lie to her face. I admitted it was true and that Rachel had ruined the surprise by accident. Amanda started crying, not happy tears, stressed, overwhelmed tears. She said she wasn't ready, that she loved Derek but hadn't expected this, and she felt ambushed. My stomach dropped further. She said she'd been thinking lately that she wanted to go back to school for her master's degree, and she and Derek hadn't talked about timeline stuff, marriage, kids, any of it. She felt like she was being put on the spot in front of his entire family. I asked if she was going to say no. She said she didn't know. She was panicking. By this point, it was almost 7. The boat was visible in the distance, heading back toward the dock. The family was gathering at the shore, excited and ready to celebrate. I had to make a split-second decision. I told everyone there was a change of plans and the proposal wasn't happening tonight, that Derek had changed his mind. People were confused and disappointed, but they dispersed, When the boat pulled up to the dock, only I was standing there. Derek looked confused. He helped Amanda off the boat, then pulled me aside and asked where everyone was. I told him what happened, that Rachel had accidentally told Amanda that Amanda was freaking out, and that I'd sent everyone away. Derek's face went through about 5 different emotions: shock, anger, devastation, confusion. He asked if Amanda had said no. I said she hadn't said anything yet, that she just needed time to process, without the pressure of 40 family members watching. Derek went to talk to Amanda privately. They walked down the shore, away from the house, and talked for over an hour. The family reunion continued awkwardly around this drama. People kept asking what happened, if there was still a proposal, if Derek and Amanda were okay. Eventually, Derek and Amanda came back. They looked exhausted, but calm. Derek announced to the family that he had proposed, and Amanda had said yes, but that they needed some space and would celebrate later. Everyone cheered, but it was subdued. The magical moment had been completely destroyed. After the weekend, Derek called me and absolutely laid into me. He said I'd ruined the most important moment of his life, that I'd had one job and I'd failed spectacularly. I tried to explain that I didn't tell Rachel, that it was an accident, that I'd tried to do damage control. He said I should have controlled the information better and that I'd let him down. He didn't speak to me for 3 months. Amanda, weirdly, wasn't mad at me. She actually called me a few days after the reunion and thanked me for dispersing the crowd. She said if she'd gotten off that boat and seen 40 people waiting, she might have had a panic attack. The time alone with Derek to talk through her feelings had been necessary. She explained that she ultimately said yes because she does want to marry Derek, but the surprise public proposal had terrified her because she's an intensely private person, and the idea of such a personal moment happening in front of an audience had been overwhelming. She and Derek have since talked through the timeline stuff, the master's degree, the timing of marriage and kids, and they're on the same page now. They got married 2 months ago. It was a beautiful, intimate ceremony with just close family and friends. Derek and I have mostly repaired our relationship, though he still sometimes makes comments about me ruining his proposal. He jokes about it now, but I know part of him is still bitter. Rachel still feels terrible. She sent Derek and Amanda a very expensive wedding gift as an apology. The family still talks about the proposal disaster at gatherings, usually laughing about it now that everything worked out okay. But I learned a valuable lesson. If someone trusts you with keeping a proposal secret, tell absolutely nobody who you wouldn't trust with your life, because one person with loose lips can destroy months of planning in seconds. And if I ever plan a proposal, I'm telling exactly 0 people in advance. Some moments are too important to risk. Let me tell you about the nightmare Airbnb situation that turned into a full-blown legal battle and taught me to never, ever rent out my property again. 2 years ago, I inherited my grandmother's house when she passed away. It's a small, 2-bedroom cottage in a beach town, fully furnished, really charming. I lived across the country and didn't want to sell it for sentimental reasons, so I decided to list it on Airbnb to cover the property taxes and maintenance costs. For the first year, everything went smoothly. I had great guests, good reviews, made decent income from it. I hired a local property manager to handle turnovers and issues, and it seemed like the perfect solution. Then I got a booking request from a woman named Patricia. Patricia's profile looked fine. A few reviews, nothing concerning. She booked the cottage for 2 weeks in October, which was off-season, so I was happy to have the reservation. She checked in on a Monday. The property manager did the usual walkthrough, gave her the keys. Everything seemed normal. Wednesday evening, I got a message from Patricia through the Airbnb app. She said she'd fallen in love with the cottage and the town, and asked if she could extend her stay by another 2 weeks. I checked my calendar. I had no bookings after her checkout date, so I agreed and updated the reservation. 2 weeks later, as her new checkout date approached, Patricia messaged again, asking to extend another month. She said she was going through a difficult time personally, and the cottage was providing her peace and healing. I felt sympathetic, and again, I had no upcoming bookings. I agreed, but told her this would be the last extension, as I had maintenance scheduled and potential holiday bookings coming up. Patricia agreed and paid for the additional month. That's when things started getting weird. The property manager tried to do a routine mid-stay check-in, which was in the house rules, and Patricia refused to let her in. She said she was entitled to privacy and didn't want anyone entering while she was staying there. I messaged Patricia explaining that the check-in was standard procedure, but she got defensive and said I was harassing her. Red flags were going up, but she'd been paying on time and hadn't damaged anything as far as I knew, so I let it go. As her checkout date approached again, Patricia messaged saying she wanted to rent the cottage long-term, potentially for a year. She offered to pay monthly at a rate slightly below my Airbnb nightly rate. I declined. I explained that I used the property for short-term rentals and wasn't interested in a long-term tenant situation. She pushed back, saying she'd been a model guest and deserved consideration. I firmly said no, and reminded her that her checkout date was in 3 days. Checkout day arrived. Patricia didn't check out. The property manager went to the cottage at checkout time, and Patricia answered the door but refused to leave. She said she'd decided to stay and would continue paying rent. I immediately contacted Airbnb support. This is where I learned how utterly useless Airbnb is in these situations. Airbnb said that since Patricia had been a guest with multiple extended stays, the situation had become complicated, and I should work it out directly with the guest. They offered no real support or intervention. I called Patricia directly. She said she considered herself a tenant now, not a guest, and that I'd have to formally evict her if I wanted her out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She'd essentially squatted in my property by exploiting the extended stay situation. I consulted with a lawyer. The news was bad, because Patricia had been staying there for over a month, cumulatively through the extensions. She'd established tenancy rights in that state. Even though she'd booked through Airbnb and there was no formal lease, the length of stay gave her legal protections. To remove her, I'd have to go through a formal eviction process, which could take months. I was furious. This woman had manipulated the situation deliberately, using the extended stays to establish tenancy, and now I couldn't even access my own property. I filed for eviction. Patricia, apparently, had done this before. My lawyer discovered she'd been evicted from 2 other short-term rentals in neighboring states using the same method. She was essentially a professional squatter who targeted sympathetic Airbnb hosts. The eviction process was a nightmare. Patricia fought it at every turn, filing continuances, claiming hardship, arguing that I'd agreed to let her stay long-term, which was a lie. She stopped paying anything, not rent, not utilities, nothing. But because the eviction was pending, I couldn't cut off utilities or change locks. That would be illegal and would actually hurt my case. During this time, my property manager did a visual inspection from outside the cottage, legal since Patricia had locked her out. The property looked trashed. There was garbage piling up, stuff all over the yard. The place was clearly being neglected. I was losing money on mortgage, utilities, property taxes, and legal fees, while this woman lived rent-free in my grandmother's house. The eviction took 4 months total. When Patricia finally left, escorted out by the sheriff after losing her last legal challenge, the property was destroyed. Holes in the walls, carpet stained and damaged beyond repair, broken appliances. She'd been smoking inside despite it being explicitly prohibited, so everything smelled terrible. She'd also apparently had multiple people staying with her, despite the Airbnb booking being for one person. The damage was estimated at over $15,000. I filed an insurance claim and tried to go after Patricia for the damages. She had no assets to seize. Judgment proof. I was never going to see a penny from her. Airbnb refused to cover any of the damages, saying the situation had fallen outside their host guarantee protections because it became a tenancy dispute. I spent months and thousands more dollars repairing the cottage. New flooring, New paint, replacing appliances, deep cleaning, all of it. I sold the property 6 months later. I couldn't handle the stress or risk of it happening again. The cottage that had been in my family for generations, that I'd planned to keep forever, was gone because one terrible person exploited the system. The worst part? Patricia is apparently still doing this. My lawyer said she moves from state to state, targeting small-time Airbnb hosts who don't know the tenancy laws, establishing residency, and then squatting until she's forced out. She uses the free months of living to save money, then moves on to the next victim. There's apparently no real way to stop people like her. They know exactly how to exploit the gaps between short-term rental platforms and tenancy laws. I've since learned that this is becoming more common. There are entire online communities where people share strategies for establishing tenancy rights through short-term rentals and gaming the eviction system. The lesson I learned? Never allow extended stays through Airbnb. Never feel sympathetic toward a guest asking for extensions. Always have an airtight rental agreement that explicitly prevents tenancy establishment. Or better yet, just don't rent your property to strangers at all. The risk isn't worth it. I think about my grandmother's cottage sometimes, and I feel this deep sadness that something she loved and cared for ended up being destroyed because I tried to do something nice by keeping it in the family and making it available to travelers. Patricia turned what should have been a passive income stream into the most expensive, stressful nightmare of my life, and somewhere out there, she's probably doing it to someone else right now. Let's dive into another crazy story. I'm still processing this betrayal, and I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand why my best friend of 10 years tried to ruin the biggest opportunity of my career. I met Jamie in college. We were roommates freshman year and just clicked immediately. Same sense of humor, same taste in movies, same ambitions. We both majored in communications and dreamed of working in media. After graduation, we both moved to the same city and stayed close even as life got busy. For the past few years, we've both been grinding in entry-level media jobs. I worked at a small digital marketing firm. Jamie worked at a local news station. We'd meet for drinks every week, complain about our jobs, dream about better opportunities. 6 months ago, a position opened up at a major streaming platform's content division. It was a dream job, great salary, creative control, working on original programming. Both Jamie and I saw the posting and both decided to apply. We talked about it openly. We agreed that whoever got it, the other would be genuinely happy for them. No weirdness, no jealousy. We even helped each other prep for potential interviews. I got called for a first-round interview. Jamie didn't. Jamie seemed disappointed but supportive, told me I'd do great, asked me to tell them about the interview afterward. The first interview went really well. They liked my portfolio, my ideas for their content strategy, my vision for audience engagement. They called me back for a second interview, this one with the department head and 2 senior producers. This was the big one, the interview that would basically determine if I got the job. Jamie helped me prepare. We did practice interviews, went through potential questions, talked through my portfolio presentation. The night before the interview, we met for dinner, and Jamie gave me a pep talk about staying confident and being myself. I felt so grateful to have such a supportive friend. The interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. I took the day off work, put on my best outfit, printed extra copies of my resume and portfolio samples. I arrived at the building 15 minutes early, checked in at reception, and was told to wait in the lobby. 2 o'clock came and went. No one came to get me. At 2:20, I politely asked the receptionist if there was a delay. She made a call, looked confused, and said, "I'm sorry, but they said your interview was at 1 o'clock. They waited, but you were a no-show, so they moved on." My blood went cold. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email confirming my interview time, 2 p.m. She looked at it, made another call, and after some back and forth, someone from HR came down. The HR person looked at my email, then pulled up their records on her phone. In their system, my interview was listed as 1 p.m. I was completely baffled. I'd confirmed via email multiple times. I had written confirmation that it was 2 o'clock. The HR person said they'd received an email from my address the day before, saying I needed to move the interview earlier due to a scheduling conflict and confirming 1 p.m. I never sent that email. They pulled it up on their computer. It had come from my email address, had my signature. Everything looked legitimate, but I absolutely did not send it. My heart was racing. Someone had accessed my email and changed my interview time to make me miss it. The HR person was sympathetic, but said the hiring team had already left and wouldn't be available for another interview until the following week. She'd see what she could do, but I could tell from her tone that my chances were basically destroyed. I left the building in a daze, got to my car, and immediately checked my email account's activity log. Someone had logged into my email the previous evening from a different IP address. I checked the location. It was in my city, in the neighborhood where Jamie lived. My stomach dropped. I drove straight to Jamie's apartment, knocked on the door. Jamie answered, looking surprised to see me. I asked point blank if Jamie had accessed my email. The look on Jamie's face told me everything: guilt, panic, and then a weak attempt at confusion, asking what I was talking about. I told Jamie I knew someone had logged into my email and changed my interview time. I said I had the activity logs and the location data. Jamie crumbled, started crying, and admitted it. The story came out between sobs. Jamie had been devastated about not getting an interview while I did. Felt like I was going to get this dream job while Jamie stayed stuck. In a moment of jealousy and desperation, Jamie had logged into my email. I'd shared my password with Jamie years ago during a trip when I needed someone to check my email for me, and I'd never changed it. Jamie had found the interview confirmation, contacted the company pretending to be me, requested an earlier time, and confirmed it. The plan was for me to miss the interview, blow the opportunity, and somehow that would make things fair again. I was so angry I couldn't even speak coherently. I just stared at Jamie, this person I'd trusted completely, who deliberately sabotaged me out of jealousy. Jamie kept apologizing, saying it was a mistake, that the jealousy had become overwhelming, that seeing me succeed while Jamie failed had broken something inside. I left without saying anything else. I immediately changed all my passwords and contacted the streaming platform's HR department. I explained the entire situation, provided the email activity logs showing the unauthorized access, and asked if there was any way to salvage the opportunity. They were understanding, but said the position needed to be filled quickly, and they were moving forward with other candidates. They said they'd keep my application on file, but I knew that was corporate speak for, "This is over." I lost the job opportunity because my best friend couldn't handle their own jealousy. Jamie sent me dozens of texts and emails over the following days, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, saying the friendship meant more than any job. I didn't respond. About a week later, Jamie showed up at my apartment. I answered the door, and Jamie tried to hug me, still apologizing. I told Jamie we were done, that what happened wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated betrayal. Jamie had spent an entire evening helping me prepare, knowing the whole time that I'd missed the interview because of what Jamie had done. That was sociopathic. Jamie broke down, said I was overreacting, that friends fight and get past things. I said friends don't sabotage each other's careers. I closed the door. The mutual friends we had were split on the situation. Some thought I was being too harsh, that jealousy makes people do crazy things and forgiveness is important. Others thought what Jamie did was unforgivable and they'd have done the same thing. Here's the part that still makes me angry. 3 months after all this happened, Jamie got hired at a different streaming platform, a competitor to the one I'd interviewed with. Jamie posted about it on social media, all this stuff about dreams coming true and never giving up. People who didn't know what happened were congratulating Jamie, and I had to watch from the sidelines, knowing that while I was dealing with the aftermath of Jamie's betrayal, Jamie just moved on and got a similar opportunity anyway. Life isn't fair, I guess. I'm doing okay now. I got a promotion at my current job, and I'm building. New friendships that aren't based on a decade of history, but I still feel the sting of losing both a friendship and a career opportunity in one devastating blow. The lesson I learned is that even people you trust completely can turn on you when jealousy gets involved, and that passwords should never, ever be shared, no matter how much you trust someone. Because you never know when that trust will be weaponized against you. Let's get started with the next story. Getting married should be one of the happiest experiences of your life. For me, it turned into a year-long nightmare that ended in court, all because of a wedding photographer who went completely off the rails. My husband and I got married last year. We'd been together for 6 years, and we wanted a relatively small wedding, about 80 guests, beautiful venue, nothing too over the top but still special. Finding a photographer was important to us. We looked at dozens of portfolios, met with several photographers, and finally settled on someone named Diane, who came highly recommended and had gorgeous work in her portfolio. Diane seemed professional during our initial meeting. She walked us through packages, showed us previous wedding albums, explained her shooting style. Her prices were on the higher end, $3,500 for full-day coverage with digital files and a printed album. We signed a contract and paid a 50% deposit. Leading up to the wedding, communication with Diane was fine. She showed up to our engagement shoot on time. The photos were beautiful. She attended the venue walkthrough, talked through the timeline. Everything seemed great. Wedding day arrived. Diane showed up with an assistant. Both had professional equipment. They seemed ready to work. The wedding itself was perfect. Diane and her assistant were everywhere, capturing moments, directing group photos, everything you'd want from a wedding photographer. When the night ended, Diane told us she'd have a preview of photos ready in about a week, and the full gallery with edited images in 4 to 6 weeks. We were thrilled. We'd seen her taking amazing shots all day and couldn't wait to see the results. 1 week passed. No preview. 2 weeks. Nothing. I sent Diane an email asking about the preview photos. She responded saying she'd been busy with other weddings, but would have something for us soon. 3 weeks. Still nothing. I called. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. No response. 4 weeks. Radio silence. At this point, I was getting worried. I sent multiple emails, called repeatedly, even messaged her on social media. Nothing. 6 weeks passed. The timeline she'd promised for full delivery came and went, with zero communication. I started looking at online reviews for Diane's business and found several recent reviews that were alarming. Other couples saying she'd disappeared after their weddings, that they couldn't get their photos, that she'd stopped responding to all contact. This couldn't be happening. My husband and I drove to the address listed for her photography studio. It was a shared workspace building, and when we asked the front desk about Diane's business, they said she'd stopped renting the space 2 months ago. We tried her home address, which we'd gotten from the contract. A different person answered, said Diane had moved out and they didn't have forwarding information. Diane had essentially vanished, and she had our wedding photos. I was devastated. We'd spent $3,500, and more importantly, these were irreplaceable memories of one of the most important days of our lives. I filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. I left detailed reviews on every platform where Diane had business listings. I contacted other couples from the recent negative reviews and found out there were at least 6 other weddings where Diane had disappeared with people's photos. We consulted with a lawyer. He said we could sue for breach of contract, but finding Diane to serve her with papers was going to be challenging if she'd essentially gone into hiding. 3 months after the wedding, I got an email from Diane. She said she'd been dealing with personal issues and had fallen behind on editing. She said she still had our photos and would deliver them, but she needed more time. I responded immediately, saying we'd been trying to contact her for months, asking for a specific timeline and proof that our photos actually existed. She sent a handful of unedited preview images from our wedding. They were real. Our photos existed. She said she'd have everything ready in 2 more weeks. 2 weeks passed. Nothing. The cycle repeated. She'd occasionally send an email promising delivery, then disappear again for weeks. This went on for 6 months. Finally, 8 months after our wedding, Diane sent an email saying our photos were ready. But there was a catch. She said that due to the extra time and effort required, and storage costs for keeping our files so long, we owed her an additional $1,200 before she'd release the photos. I lost my mind. She was holding our photos hostage, demanding more money after disappearing for 8 months. I responded saying absolutely not, that she'd breached our contract, and if she didn't deliver our photos immediately, we'd sue. She replied with, "Then I guess you're not getting your photos. Sue me if you want, but I'll just delete everything out of spite." She actually wrote that in an email. That email became the best evidence we could have asked for. We sued her for breach of contract, provided the email as evidence of her refusing to deliver the contracted work and threatening to destroy our property. Diane didn't show up to court, didn't respond to the lawsuit at all. We won by default judgment. The judge awarded us our full payment back plus damages for emotional distress, totaling around $6,000. But winning a judgment and collecting it are two different things. We've been trying to collect for months. Diane apparently has no assets to seize, no regular income we can garnish, nothing, and we still don't have our wedding photos. Here's the truly heartbreaking part. We recently found out through one of the other couples she scammed that Diane had been struggling with serious addiction issues. She'd been taking deposits from weddings to fund her addiction, showing up to shoot the weddings, but then being too incapacitated to actually edit and deliver the photos. Multiple hard drives containing hundreds of couples' wedding photos are sitting somewhere in her possession, and she's either unable or unwilling to deliver them. Part of me feels terrible for her, understanding that addiction is a disease. But part of me is just angry that her personal struggles resulted in so many couples losing irreplaceable memories. We've accepted that we'll probably never get our professional wedding photos. We have photos from guests, cell phone pictures, some nice ones from friends with decent cameras, but it's not the same. There are moments from our wedding that I have vague memories of, but no photographs to confirm. Did my grandmother cry during the ceremony? I think so, but there's no photo to prove it. What did the first dance look like from anyone's perspective other than our own? I'll never know. The wedding industry needs better regulations. Photographers should be required to carry insurance specifically for situations like this. Couples should have some recourse beyond spending thousands on lawyers to chase down judgments they'll never collect. The advice I give everyone now: research your wedding photographer thoroughly, look for recent reviews, check with other recent clients, and consider photographers who work with larger companies that have accountability structures in place. And if possible, include contract clauses that require delivery of unedited files on a backup drive immediately after the wedding, just in case. Because the alternative is what happened to us, paying thousands of dollars for professional memories that exist somewhere on a hard drive you'll never see. This is probably the weirdest, most unsettling relationship story I have, and even now, months later, I'm still trying to understand what actually happened. I'd been dating my girlfriend Hannah for about 8 months. We'd met through mutual friends, had similar interests, and the relationship felt easy and comfortable. She was a freelance graphic designer who worked from home. I worked in IT at a mid-sized company. Everything seemed completely normal until I got a very strange message on Instagram from someone I'd never met. The message said, "Hey, I know this is weird, but are you actually dating someone named Hannah? Because someone using your photos and pretending to be you has been talking to my sister online for months." I was completely confused. I responded asking what they meant. They sent me screenshots. Someone had created an entire fake Instagram account using my photos, pictures from my actual Instagram, pictures I'd posted over the years, and was pretending to be me. But the account had a slightly different username and was claiming to be a single guy living in a different city. This fake me had been talking to this person's sister, flirting with her, building what she thought was a genuine connection with someone. I looked at the screenshots closely. The photos were definitely mine. Pictures from vacations, pictures with friends, even pictures Hannah had taken of me. But the captions and context were all different. I told this person that yes, those were my photos, but I had no idea who created that account or why. They sent me the fake account's username. I looked it up. It was an entire profile, dozens of posts, all using my photos, building a completely fabricated life for me in a city I'd never lived in, with hobbies I didn't have, claiming to work at a company I'd never heard of. Someone had stolen my entire visual identity and created a fake person. I felt violated and deeply creeped out. Who would do this? And why? I started investigating. The account had been active for about 6 months, posting regularly, engaging with people, building followers. It looked completely legitimate if you didn't know the real me. I reported the account to Instagram for impersonation. They sent an automated response saying they'd look into it, but I wanted to know who was behind it. I did some digging through the account's followers and people it followed. I looked for patterns, for any clue about who might have access to so many of my photos, and then I noticed something. The account followed Hannah, and Hannah followed it back. My stomach dropped. I clicked through to see their interactions. The fake account had commented on several of Hannah's posts. Hannah had replied. They'd had what looked like friendly public exchanges. I confronted Hannah that evening. I showed her the fake account and asked if she knew anything about it. Her face went pale. She stared at the phone, then at me, and I watched her decide whether to lie or come clean. She started crying and admitted she'd created the account. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My girlfriend had been pretending to be me online. The full story came out slowly, in pieces, between her crying and me demanding answers. Hannah had created the account a few months into our relationship. She said she'd been curious about how people would respond to me if I was single and available. She wanted to see what kind of attention I'd get, what kinds of people would be interested in me. It started as just creating the account and posting some photos, but then people started following, started messaging, and Hannah got drawn into responding as me. She'd been conducting entire conversations with multiple people as fake me, flirting with them, building connections, keeping up elaborate lies about this fictional life. I asked why. Why would anyone do this? She said it started from insecurity. She wanted to see if people would be interested in me, and when they were, it somehow made her feel better about dating me, like she'd won some kind of competition. But then it became something else. She said it became addictive, this ability to be someone else, to control how people perceived me, to get attention and validation through this fake identity. She'd been living a double life, being my girlfriend in person, and pretending to be me in a completely separate online existence. I felt sick. I asked about the girl whose brother had messaged me. Had Hannah been leading her on? Hannah admitted that yes, she'd been talking to this girl for months, making her believe she was developing a real connection with a real person who might actually be interested in her. I asked if there were others. Hannah said yes. Multiple people who thought they were getting to know me, who had no idea they were actually talking to my girlfriend pretending to be me. The betrayal was multi-layered. She'd violated my privacy by stealing my photos and identity. She'd catfished innocent people. She'd lied to me for months. And she'd created this bizarre scenario where she was essentially in a relationship with both me and a fake version of me that she controlled. I told her we were done, that this was beyond anything I could forgive or understand. She begged me not to break up with her, said she'd delete the account immediately, that she knew it was wrong, that she'd been dealing with mental health issues, and this had been a symptom of that. I didn't care. What she'd done was too bizarre, too violating. I made her delete the account while I watched. Then I broke up with her and asked her to leave my apartment. The aftermath was complicated. I had to contact the people who'd been catfished and explain that the account was fake, that someone had been impersonating me, and I was sorry they'd been deceived. The girl whose brother had messaged me was devastated. She developed real feelings for who she thought I was. I felt terrible for these people, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I also had to go through all my social media and make sure Hannah didn't have access to any of my accounts anymore, change my privacy settings, and basically lock down my entire online presence. Some friends told me I should report Hannah to the police, that what she'd done was some form of identity theft, but I just wanted to be done with the whole situation. Hannah sent me long emails afterward, trying to explain her mental state, saying she'd started therapy, asking for another chance. I never responded. The whole experience left me with this deeply unsettled feeling. How well do we really know the people we're in relationships with? What goes on in someone's head that makes them create an elaborate fake identity of their partner and catfish strangers for months? I've been hesitant to date since then. I'm paranoid about who has access to my photos, what people might do with them. I've made most of my social media private, and I'm very careful about what I share online now. The weird part is, I still don't fully understand why Hannah did it. Her explanations never really made sense. Insecurity? Mental health issues? Some kind of control thing? Whatever the reason, it was one of the most bizarre violations of trust I've ever experienced. And somewhere out there are probably still people who remember conversations with me that I never actually had. This is the story of how my landlord tried to illegally evict me using fabricated evidence, and how fighting back became a full-time job for 3 months. I'd been living in my apartment for 2 years. It was a small one-bedroom in a building owned by a guy named Richard, who owned several properties in the area. Richard was always kind of difficult, slow to fix things, nitpicky about minor issues, but nothing that seemed outright problematic, until he decided he wanted me gone. It started about 6 months ago. I got a notice on my door saying I'd violated my lease by having an unauthorized pet in the apartment. I don't have a pet. I've never had a pet in that apartment. I immediately emailed Richard, explaining there must be a mistake, that I didn't have any pets. He responded with a photo attached. It showed a cat sitting in a window. He claimed the photo was taken of my apartment window and proved I was harboring an unauthorized animal. I looked at the photo closely. It was definitely not my apartment. The window frame was different, the curtains weren't mine, and I could see a part of a wall color that didn't match my unit. I told Richard the photo wasn't from my apartment and offered to let him inspect my unit to verify there was no pet. He refused the inspection and said he had multiple reports from neighbors about a cat in my unit. This was completely fabricated. I asked which neighbors had reported this. He said he couldn't disclose that information. I then received a formal lease violation notice, giving me 10 days to remove the unauthorized pet or face eviction proceedings. I was baffled and increasingly worried. This was clearly false, but Richard seemed committed to pushing it forward. I responded in writing, again stating there was no pet, providing photos of my apartment showing no pet supplies, no litter box, nothing that would indicate an animal lived there. Richard didn't respond. 10 days later, I received an eviction notice. I immediately contacted a tenant rights lawyer. She looked at everything and said Richard was clearly fabricating the violation, but I'd need to fight the eviction in court. Going to court meant taking time off work, paying legal fees, and dealing with the stress of potentially losing my home over something completely false. We went to the eviction hearing. Richard showed up with the same photo of a cat in a window and claimed multiple neighbors had confirmed the pet. My lawyer asked him to produce any of these neighbor statements. He couldn't. My lawyer presented photos I'd taken of my actual apartment window, showing that the window in his photo was architecturally different from mine. The judge looked annoyed with Richard and dismissed the eviction case immediately, saying there was insufficient evidence of any lease violation. I thought that was the end of it. 2 weeks later, I got another lease violation notice. This time, Richard claimed I was running an illegal business from my apartment. Again, completely false. I worked a regular office job and wasn't running any business. His evidence was that I'd been receiving frequent packages, which he claimed indicated commercial activity. I receive packages like any normal person who shops online. That's not evidence of running a business. I documented everything. I took photos of every package I received, showing they were all personal items ordered from normal retailers. Richard filed another eviction notice. We went back to court. The judge was visibly irritated this time, recognizing Richard from the previous frivolous case. My lawyer presented evidence that all my packages were personal items. She also pointed out that receiving packages isn't a lease violation under any standard lease terms. The judge dismissed the case again and warned Richard that filing frivolous eviction cases could result in sanctions. I should mention that during this time, living in the apartment became incredibly stressful. Richard started doing things like showing up unannounced for inspections that weren't legally permitted, leaving passive-aggressive notes about minor issues, and generally making my life difficult. The third eviction attempt came a month later. This time, Richard claimed I'd damaged the apartment and submitted photos of damage that he said I'd caused. The photos showed cracked wall tiles, water damage near a window, and some scratched flooring. None of this damage existed in my apartment. I immediately took comprehensive photos and video of every surface in my apartment, showing no such damage. When we went to court for this third eviction attempt, my lawyer had had enough. She not only defended against the current claim, but filed a countercomplaint against Richard for harassment and bad faith eviction attempts. She argued that Richard was systematically attempting to evict me using fabricated evidence, that this constituted landlord harassment, and that he should be sanctioned. The judge agreed. Richard's third eviction was dismissed. Then the judge issued sanctions against Richard, fining him and ordering him to cease all eviction attempts unless he had legitimate, documented lease violations. My lawyer also got a restraining order preventing Richard from entering my apartment without proper legal notice and legitimate reason. After the court ruling, I did some digging and found out why Richard was so desperate to get me out. A friend who worked in real estate pulled public records and discovered that Richard had sold the building. The new owner was taking possession in 4 months, and Richard had promised the buyer that all units would be vacant, so they could renovate and re-rent at much higher rates. Apparently, all the other tenants had either moved out voluntarily when offered buyouts, or were month-to-month tenants Richard could easily not renew. I was the only tenant with a long-term lease that extended past the building's sale date. Richard had been trying to illegally evict me so he could fulfill his promise to the buyer. Armed with this information, my lawyer sent Richard a letter making it clear we knew about the building sale and his motivations, and threatening further legal action if the harassment continued. Richard's lawyer responded with a settlement offer. They'd pay me $5,000 to voluntarily break my lease and move out early. I negotiated. I ultimately got them to pay me $12,000, enough to cover moving costs, security deposits on a new place, and compensation for the hell they'd put me through. I took the money and moved out. In the end, Richard got what he wanted, but it cost him significantly more than if he just offered a reasonable buyout in the first place. The whole experience taught me some valuable lessons about tenant rights. Document everything. Take photos constantly. Know your local tenant protection laws. And don't be afraid to fight back against landlords who think they can bully tenants into leaving. If I hadn't fought back, if I just moved out after the first fake violation, Richard would have gotten away with it for free. Instead, he learned that illegally harassing tenants is expensive, and honestly, that $12,000 felt like justice. And that's it for this video. Thank you for listening.